Okay, so today I am going to make some new battery cables. So this transmission has a really bad hunting problem right now where it's jumping in and out of overdrive and it's just basically undrivable at the moment. So I did some research online and everybody says that it is a electrical problem most likely. So the common area that people say to check is the grounds. So as I was going to start having a look at them, I realized these terminals are an absolute mess, as well as the cable. You can see all kinds of corrosion in there. They're pretty much pooched. Also, this one here is a little bit better on the negative side, but it's, you can tell it's not a great style of connector. The wires are all corroded, and I think it's just before I even really get to what this hunting problem is, it might be because of these cables, maybe not, but I can't really move forward without, go ahead and changing these. So this side is really bad. These batteries are actually brand new. I would say possibly these have at most maybe 5,000 kilometers. And I mean, you can tell by all the corrosion and everything, it's a mess. Everything on here is just a mess. When I bought the truck, they were gross. I mean, you look at that cable there. I mean, there is nothing good going on with that. I have scabbed a couple of things on here. This is the wire to my amp, and it's sitting up on an angle. I know it just looks horrible, but this was always supposed to be a pretty temporary thing. And then I also have the power for my lift pump, just kind of scabbed on here too. When I got the truck, all this stuff over here was there. I have no idea what these wires even go to. Also, this terminal here is really bad. So before I can even consider, moving forward with checking grounds, anything like that, like these have to be replaced. So I went and bought all this stuff the other day. I got some really nice double wall shrink tubing here. It might actually be a little bit too big, but hopefully I can shrink it down enough. This is 1/0 welding cable, and it's kind of hard to show, but there's a lot of strands in here. This is, I think, a pretty high strand count, so it's fairly flexible, not too bad, and should be good. I've also got a post cleaner that I can clean up the batteries really well with. I probably could have just used a brush, but I figured I'd get one of these. And then I got a bunch of these connectors here, which are the military style, I believe. And then I will be taking these terminal ends here, ring ends, whatever you want to call them, and I'll put that in a vise and melt a bunch of solder into those, and then keep it molten as I'm doing the process. So I'll heat this up with a torch as I'm melting new stuff in there. I'll have the end of the wire exposed down here, so once this is all full of the molten solder, I can just take the exposed wire and plug it down in there, and it kind of hardens into the solder as everything cools. And then of course I'll be putting the shrink tubing over top of that. My dad told me about it. He is an automotive electrician as well as a heavy-duty mechanic, and when he saw this battery, he was not impressed. So that'll be the project for today. First step is to remove the cables one by one and recreate them with the new materials, and then sort of reinstall and hope to God the transmission's shifting properly. Okay, well, I've got everything laid out here. One issue I'm noticing right off the bat, this cable is pretty expensive. I think it was a little under $5 a foot Canadian, and I just kind of had to guess what I had for lengths, and I just held one of these pieces up to my first terminal, or the first cable I'm going to make, which goes from positive to positive, and I definitely got probably 1.5 feet too much. So little tech tip for you, if you're ever doing this, probably take the cables off first and measure them. I had a bit of a scheduling issue and just kind of had to take a guess at it, but I think I might have flushed a few bucks down the toilet, so we'll see. Well, I just pulled the terminal end off just to have a look inside, and wow, that cable is in horrible shape. I mean, look at that. I have no idea if this will fix my transmission problem, but boy oh boy, this is long overdue. This side also just exposed like that, and yeah, what a mess. All right, well, I'm looking forward to having some new ones on there. All right, well, that is what a cable is supposed to look like. Not that, quite the difference. So the last time I did this, one thing that surprised me a bit was once I had this filled with the molten solder and I went to plug this in, it was actually really hard to get all the strands inside. The cable that I did it with last time though was a 0-AUG cable with 4400 strands, something like that, really high-end audio cable. So this stuff, I'm not sure how many it is, but I mean it should be a lot. I think I've heard like 1800 or so in this range, and I would imagine that's probably it. It's kind of hard to show. Let me see if I can zoom in a little bit. But there's a lot. Okay, so this appears to be a pretty good fit. The amount of exposed material I have, I think that should be about right. So I am going to start heating up a whole bunch of solder and filling this thing up and get ready to go. So as I was saying, this shrink tubing might be a little bit on the big side. Hopefully that'll shrink down there. I had to buy a 4-foot piece of it. So yeah, hopefully it's the right one. So I've got my shrink tubing on. I think with this, how big it is, it would have fit over this pretty easily anyways, but probably a good idea to put it on before you put an end on it. Okay, so I've got my shrink tubing already on here. In retrospect, I probably should have used the end that didn't have the sticker on it. Actually, you know what? I think I'll redo that and maybe save this piece. If I ever need it down the road, I got it. I did have to buy a 4-foot chunk after all, so there's no point not making it look as good as I can. So I'm going to try not to twist this up too much, but I want to have it as user-friendly as possible. So I can hopefully plug it in here while everything's still nice and hot and not have to worry about anything hardening on me. Okay. So it hardened up on me the first time. Luckily I was able to remelt it and get the wire stabbed in there. So this cable, luckily the strands are a little bit firmer than that audio cable that I'd used before, and it appears to have all gone in there without having any strands poking out, which is definitely what I was hoping for. So I have to give a big thanks to my dad. We were actually supposed to do this project together, I think last summer, but just due to random circumstances, we weren't able to. But he is the one who told me about this process, and after looking at how gross those other battery cables were, to be honest with you, without him telling me about this, I most likely would have just made them that same way again. So big thanks to Dad for that. So I'm just going to let it sit here and cool for a minute, and then I'll be able to put some shrink tubing on and move on to the next one. So I'm just trying to clean all the little bits of splatter off on here. Yeah, the shrink tubing is probably too big. I used a heat gun last time, but I'm going to just try and use the torch right now and just hopefully get maximum shrinkness. seems to be working. I think that's getting down there enough. I'll just try and work my way from one end to the other, I guess, so I don't get any bubbles in there. Okay, that looks pretty good. So, Dad, thank you very much for telling me about this method. That is one heck of a lot better than this old way. Everything's just all exposed and, you know, what a mess. So, thank you very much, Dad, for showing me this method. That just looks a million times better. All right, on to the next one. So I've decided to make this replacement terminal a little bit longer. This other one was a little bit tight to get on there. There wasn't much slack, and I've gone to group 31 batteries, which are a little bit taller, so that actually made it a bit tight to get the terminals on and off. So added a bit of length, and turns out I'm actually not wasting that much. I've maybe got 5-6 inches of extra, so no big deal there. Now, I do not have the right tool to cut this, so I'm just going to try with these. I might have to, actually not even too sure. See what happens here when I do this. Oh yeah, this is getting her. Okay, not too bad. So I'm just trying to cut this as gently as I can. I don't want to cut any strands in there. Alright, don't think I got any strands cut. Let's give this a real gentle twist to just try and keep everything in line. This one did not go as smoothly. Not sure if you can see, but I've got a few strands poking out over there. Just gonna hold it here for a second. It's probably hardened by now, but I just want to make sure it's good and set. Yeah, that's basically right up against there. Okay, time for a little shrink tubing. right, there we go. This is now the battery to battery cable. Both ends are done. And I'm happy with that. That looks pretty good. I think it's safe to say I bought a little bit too much cable. I think I went with 12 feet of the black stuff, and I pulled the battery ground off of the passenger side, and it can't be more than about 3 feet long. So looks like I got enough cable for the next vehicle as well. This one is pretty gross. I mean, just look at how corroded and horrible that is. I don't know if this is going to have any difference whatsoever on the transmission hunting problem, but I'm sure glad that that is no longer going to be in the truck. So as I was saying, my dad told me about this method. So I was just talking to him on the phone and told him I had done this and thought that things were going pretty well. And he said, if you really want to test it, try making one and put it in the vise without shrink tubing and see if you can yank the cable out of there. So that definitely cranks up the questions a little bit more in my mind of just how properly these are done, but I'm gonna go ahead and give it a try and see what happens. I'm kind of curious myself. All right, so before I do a little strength test, I'm gonna go ahead and try and test the cable that came on here. This was the passenger side battery ground, this connected to the block. So this is a crimped on style. It's very different than what I'm doing. But I'm just going to try and give it a tug and see if I can yank that off of there. Okay. Well, that came out of the vise, but I don't think that was slipping on here. Let's give that another try. Really tighten her down this time. Okay, that does not appear to be sliding. So let me try and put one on there and give that a go. This is my test piece. With this crusty old cable, I found it really tough to get in there compared to this other stuff. So I don't really know that this is going to be that comparable of a test. But let me just give this a tug and see. Yeah, I mean, I don't think this even went in that far, and it appears to be holding up to some pretty serious abuse. I can't get that thing out of there, so I guess we're gonna go ahead and call this a, reasonable way of doing it. Obviously, this is the old cable. This is garbage getting thrown away. I'm gonna just melt this one out of here because I do need that cable end, but I think this is a functioning way to do it. All right, so just a little update. I've got my both of my battery grounds that go to the block, one for each. There's this one, the other one's sitting over there ready. This is the cable, the red one here that goes between the two positives. And next I have to make the one that goes from the driver's side battery down to the starter. And also just having a look, I just went and picked up this 10 AUG wire and some connectors and stuff. So I'm going to replace all of the body ground and chassis grounds. I'm going to replace that one, and then there's another one that goes straight down through here to the frame, and then on this side there is just this one that goes from this negative over to the body in here. So I'm going to make some new ones and replace all of those. Yeah, I mean, everything I look at looks kind of rough, so I'm not surprised really at all that this has developed some problems. Also, just trying to look at some of the stuff here. There was a whole bunch of wires scabbed onto this post here, and yeah, it's kind of tough to make sense of some of it. So there's this one that's feeding the main sort of fuse and relay panel, and then there's one next to it though that's going down to what I assume are the starter solenoids, or I'm actually not entirely sure what that is down there, but if this one needs a constant 12 volts, I don't really see why it wouldn't have just been maybe onto here. It just seems strange. The one thing is, obviously this cable will need to get replaced too. But the thing is, when you look around the electrical system on this truck, it seems clear that somebody has been in here fiddling around with stuff. A lot of weird little things, like over here on the top of the engine, there's this end here. I have no idea what this ever plugged into. I just no clue, but the main sort of wiring harness has been sort of pulled apart and taped together and stuff. So yeah, I don't have the foggiest idea what this thing came from. I'm not aware of any other electronic stuff or electrical stuff on this motor that's not here, but when you look at the front bumper, there's some holes drilled in here. So possibly this was used as maybe like a flagging truck or something. I don't think that would be the kind of stuff that would be used for snow plows, or maybe there was some auxiliary lighting of some kind on there, and possibly this is sort of a remnant of that. I really don't have a clue what that was from. So I'm trying to, you know, with my limited electrical knowledge, start dissecting some of the stuff that just seems to be scabbed on here. And there's a few things like that. These ones here, so this brown one is going down to the starter, and then this red one and it's been kind of taped into it, and it goes to this connector here. So I would assume that's some sort of starter solenoid stuff. I'm not even too sure. I think at this time, you know, and then there was this stuff too. These were just on the battery. I have no idea. If you follow this, it just goes right into the main sort of split loom stuff that goes across the engine, this here. Yeah, and I don't even know. I mean, it starts out as orange and black wires and then is like spliced into red ones. But if you go up here, assuming it continues on this way, I don't really see any red wires in here. So I've definitely got some detective work to try and figure out which one of these cables and wires are needed, what the heck they're for, if they were added on after the fact. I have no idea. But the truck has been running fine with them on there, so right now I'm going to try and just keep things as simple as I can and just get these grounds and battery cables on and see if that fixes my transmission issue. And then, you know, from there I can continue to go through and try and figure out what each of these things is. But one issue I've had is I often have too many projects going at once, and I know a little tiny bit about electrical stuff, but I really need to try and not overcomplicate things right now. So I went and got some more supplies, and it's time to make the last cable that goes from the positive battery terminal to the starter. And then I'm going to use this stuff here and make some new body grounds and stuff, and just try and fix what I can right now. Just look at these cables that were on here. What a mess. My goodness. All right, so I went ahead and put all new chassis and body grounds. Got the new battery cables as well as new terminals, and this is the line that goes over to the other positive terminal. So everything has been replaced. Also on this side, I did the body and chassis grounds. Unfortunately, I had to still put all this junk back on. I just tried to start it and it wouldn't start, but once I put this one on, it would, which is a little nerve-wracking considering how beat up it is. So still a lot of work to do to clean up the electrical system, but at least the cables are done. And actually I still have to do the feed cable from this over to the fuse panel in here. and the ground coming out of that, but it's a big step in the right direction. So anyways, just wanted to say thanks for watching. This was a fun little project. If you want to see more of me working on this truck and trying to get all its many problems sorted out, come on by again. Alright, well, it's late. Spent the day in the shop, got the cables done, new chassis and body grounds, and the hunting problem in the transmission didn't go away, but I think it might be due to the switch, my overdrive switch, or possibly the fact that I don't have a lockup switch right now or something. So either way, I'm glad these things are dealt with, and you know, on to the next thing. So anyways, just want to say thanks for watching. Have a good day.